All right, what is up, everybody? So I'm here with Valkyr. I've been playing basically only Valkyr since the Isle Weaver update dropped. I have not tried the new game mode because it's in Duviri, so you have randomized loadouts, and I know that there's a trick to lock your loadout, but I just didn't feel like going through the trouble of trying to RNG into Valkyr when she was the only thing I wanted to play. So, what do I think about the rework? So, I'd like to kind of go over my thoughts, go over the build I settled on, go over some of the, what I think are pretty big buffs, and some of the kind of design confusion that I feel with this rework. So, let's go over the rework itself. Valkyrie is much tankier now. So, if we go to her abilities, her base stats are significantly higher in terms of health and armor. She has a brand new passive. So before it was a pretty terrible passive, which was basically the Kavat's Grace mod, where when you fall from a high distance, you don't have that like pick up, that animation of picking yourself up. Um, Now you have this rage meter, which you'll see on the bottom right of the UI. Um, so when you hit enemies or kill enemies with melee weapons, it increases her damage. So the meter will go from 0 to 300%. There's a little line in the middle of the meter. If you die when that meter is above half, the whole meter will get consumed and you will get 5 seconds of invulnerability. So, obviously, a much better passive. However, they did take away the invulnerability from Hysteria. Her one, significantly better. It's much more reliable as a mobility option. So I noticed that the like how your momentum gets preserved or whatnot, or like how you stop on surfaces you want to stop on. It's way more consistent now. It just didn't really work very well before. So as a mobility tool, it's significantly better, and it also can group enemies together. So very, very much better now. It also has, like I think I just have stretch on this build, or maybe I have stretch and auger reach, but it has decent range. Warcry is very similar. It's good. I mean, Warcry is great. The one thing they did change with this is that I think it didn't work like this before. It's the buff extends to enemies or allies in affinity range, so that's pretty nice. So another thing is paralysis. So they also took the slow away from Warcry, which was always kind of weird because Warcry was like a kind of like a set it and forget it type buff. So it was kind of weird. It had an enemy effect on it at all. So now her paralysis, her 3, they did decrease the energy cost of this quite a bit since the first dev workshop for her rework. So that's nice. It's basically just like an AOE slow, and I don't know. It doesn't really knock back. I've actually been using the augment for this, so it sucks in instead of knocking back. And it slows enemies. It kind of does like this like mini stun type thing almost. And then it also gives them a damage vulnerability to melee attacks. So very, very heavy melee focus for Valkyr, which it was always kind of always the case. Now with her 4, the energy drain is fixed, which is nice. The lifesteal is also fixed. She gets a armor increase while she's in her 4 because she doesn't have invulnerability anymore. And really nicely, she is immune to status effects, so which she kind of had before because she was invulnerable, but it's status effect immunity is always good in Warframe. It's extremely strong. So I'm kind of ignoring some of the augment effects on there, but that's her rework in a nutshell. So the big to do was them removing her invulnerability from her 4. And I made a lot of videos about this. Now, I think at the end of the day, if you're just like playing Valkyr as you would normally play Valkyr, I think she is as good or probably significantly better. Now she can basically be invulnerable all the time with any melee weapon instead of just Hysteria. I think if you're going to play Valkyr, you're probably going to want to use Hysteria because, frankly, her claws are absurdly powerful, and she like they just do a shit ton of damage. And she also gets that status immunity, which you don't have if you don't have Hysteria on. You also get a ton more armor, which may or may not be good. We'll talk about that in a sec. So overall, I think it's a good rework. Now, where I start to kind of question things is how the rework has shaken out. So originally, based off of the first dev workshop, I don't think the invulnerability phase of her passive was this long. She also had higher energy costs. So they were really trying to get her to be a health tank frame. She's like the armor frame now. I'm pretty sure she has 1,000 base armor, which is kind of insane. I think the only frame that's like that is maybe Corvex. I think has a shit ton of armor. So the build I was using for health tanking was this one. So, she does use a decent amount of energy. I also want high energy because I have Tau Forged Violet Shards for the extra melee crit damage. So I want my energy up. Eternal War is just super nice quality of life. I just really like this augment. Adaptation. So a lot of this build is dedicated to survivability, right? Swift Momentum is nice because I really like running Tennokai on her with Naramon, so both of the effects of Swift Momentum are nice there. Prime Sure Footed for that massive damage increase. Double defensive arcanes, so I had Arcane Guardian and Arcane Blessing because she does have self-healing. And then, triple umbrals and adaptation for some survivability. Now, what did I find with this build? First of all, man. Oh, and I'm also running Gloom for healing, so that's also why I didn't have Arcane Grace. So I'm using a Helminth, 3 to 4-ish mods, depending on how you want to interpret Umbral Intensify. 3 to 4-ish mods for defensive reasons. And both of my arcanes. Now, on Steel Path, she felt very tanky. I tried EDA and ETA, and that's where things kind of started to break down. EDA, it started to get a little dicey. ETA, oh boy. I was triggering her passive all the time. Now, did I die? No. But that's because of her passive. So, her passive, as I mentioned before, you get this 5-second invulnerability window. Now, I was thinking to myself, well, in harder content, I'm triggering even with this massive investment in being a health tank, I'm triggering her passive all the time. So why don't I just drop all of these mods and just rely on her passive for survivability? How would that shake out? So that's when I switched to this build. No Helminth ability, because frankly, I kind of think all of her abilities are actually pretty good now. Archon Stretch for energy regen, because one thing with her is that you want, she does use like some amount of energy now. Like you actually use her, or I at least was using her abilities. They don't cost a ton, but like, it's nice. I have a companion that's doing electric or proccing electric status effect, so it's like free energy, why not? So some range, and then we have so because I am probably going to be using Hysteria, I you can all because Hysteria has that status immunity, so you can also use Hysterical Assault instead of Prime Sure-footed. So that gets you the mobility of being able to jump on targets, and it also gets you 50% parkour velocity and 50% sprint speed when you do that. So between this and the updated Rip Line and your Warcry, I guess Warcry doesn't give you actual movement speed anymore, but between the updated Rip Line and this augment, like Valkyr has a ton of mobility and a ton of speed. So I actually think this has been really fun using this augment. So I have a bunch of range. Range is quite good on her now because they changed Warcry to buff allies in affinity range, but then they added stuff that you actually care about range now. So this is where like things start to get a little weird, right? Because they did a lot of things with this rework that just like don't really like make sense with each other. So like you don't need range because Warcry's buff is just affinity range, so you can dump range as a stat. But then you want range because of Ripline and paralysis. So okay. I mean, I'm not going to complain because like these abilities are actually good to use now. It's just a little strange. I guess it's nice because people have the option of just using like narrow-minded if they want. So range is really good. Prime continuity, you know, it's like, I mean, I don't know, man. I feel like prime continuity is on almost every single build. It's just nice quality of life. I felt like natural talent was really good. I'm actually using the mod as opposed to using Archon shards because I'm using all crit damage Archon shards. So I'm using my Archon shards for other things. So that's why I'm actually using the mod natural talent, which I haven't done in a while. Umbral Intensify, frankly, just because I had an Umbral form on here already, and you know, just for some additional strength. Now you could definitely replace natural talent if you wanted. You could replace this with, you know, whatever. Probably Blind Rage, honestly, would be a good alternative. Um, One thing is that if you are going to be in Hysteria, it can cost a decent amount of energy if you use Blind Rage, but that's another option. So that's going to give you more damage. It's going to give you, you know, more Warcry attack speed, etc. Now we get to the two augments. So, Eternal War, really great quality of life. I already talked about Hysterical Assault. Prolonged Paralysis is actually like pretty sick. So, you know, I mentioned her mobility is really good now between Ripline and Hysterical Assault. Her grouping ability is also absolutely absurd. Because you have Ripline, which can group enemies up and move you, and then you also have Paralysis, which will also group enemies up and debuff them to take a massively increased melee damage, and it basically stuns them. They're so slow and it takes them so long to get up that it basically stuns them. So she has a lot of CC now and a lot of mobility. And that brings us to my last mod, which is Fast Deflection. So why Fast Deflection? So if we look at her shields, so she has 185 shields, 0.6 second delay for shield recharge, and a rate of 46.1. This comes out to like almost exactly full regen of your shields every time you proc your passive. So in addition to the 5 set, so if you die, they probably got through your shield, so that's 1 second. You die, you know, quote unquote die. You get 5 seconds of invulnerability from your passive, and by the time your passive is up, your shields are back again. So you get another second. So you have 6 seconds to build up your passive meter up to 50% or 150% bonus damage to be able to trigger your passive again. So I found that I didn't need any defensive builds. I mean, or any defensive mods. Honestly, you could probably very easily drop Fast Deflection as well. I just like, you know, I figured I would try it out. It seemed like a funny idea. It ended up working really well. So, in a, you know, ironically, and I believe that the duration of the invulnerability window was a little lower originally in the first dev workshop. So this is another thing where they focused on giving her a lot of armor. So her base armor is 1,000 and her base health is 750. So like, you know, when you have full umbrals on, like, man, like Valkyr is thick, which, you know, we already knew that, but now she has the stats to match. So it's kind of, this is another one of those things where it's at odds with itself because she has so much armor and so much health now, and she has tons of ways to increase her armor. However, because of her passive, you're better off just completely ignoring that armor. So, you know, yet again, it's just kind of weird. You know, it's just a little strange. As far as arcanes go, I used to use Arcane Fury. That feels like a huge waste now because you just have so much melee damage. Um, so, I went with Arcane Energize and Battery. So, Battery is really nice because, one, like I said before, I want my energy to be over a certain threshold so that I can proc those Violet Arcanes. Um, Additionally, the extra arcane battery will make your enemy energy go higher when you have the Warcry buff on for increased armor and when you're in Hysteria for increased armor. So I think you top out around like 1100 energy or something like that with this build. So between that and Arcane Energize, like you don't have any energy problems. Like you are just completely set. So this is the build that I ended up settling on. I thought it was really fun. No energy issues. It had tons of mobility, tons of CC, enemy grouping. Like it felt like a bajillion amount, damage. Like damage was not a problem at all. It just felt really nice. It just felt really comfy. And my one concern was that would I be able to hit enemies enough to build up her meter to trigger her passive, and I didn't die a single time. It was never a problem. I even did the not the lich, the infested lich fight, the Coda fight with Valkyr, and I had no problem surviving, even with all the damage you take from the mechanics in that fight. So survivability does not seem to be a problem whatsoever. So now let's we can kind of actually look at her mechanics in action a little bit. So I'm going to pause the enemies just to kind of show things off. So, building her meter is as simple as hitting enemies. So, I think I hit a couple enemies there, but it's really not hard to build your meter up. And the other thing is she has so many grouping abilities that you're stacked up. Boom. You are completely stacked. Um, so it's very, very, very easy to maintain her passive. Um, if we look at something else, so let me just get some more enemies up here. Now, if you look at my energy, I'm at 525. If I cast War Cry, brings me to 700. I'm in Hysteria. Oh, it actually doesn't. Oh, no, it does. So I'm at 1100 with Hysteria. So, you know, pretty nice. Now, Hysteria is like just absolutely stupid amounts of damage. Like, I have no combo, and it's just like, it's just insane. And I have like a bunch of like blood rush and stuff on this build, so I think whether you use Hysteria, whether you use a normal melee weapon, the only thing with Hysteria, and I already made a bug report about this, I don't know if it's actually a bug here. I'm gonna turn my audio up pretty high. So like you hear that persistent like fluttering noise? That is on all of the time when you're in Hysteria. And it drives me up a wall. I that is the only thing I don't like about this rework. It is infuriating. So for her talons, since we're talking about her talons, I use like I have a heavy attack build, just kind of like a normal like straight up damage build where I have just a shit ton of corrosive damage. I called this fart because I was messing around with gas on this, but it's funny, so I just kept it that way. Because melee influence is so freaking broken, you can like she barely has any status chance, but it's still worth putting melee influence on her because it's just that good. So, this also helps clear enemies out. Plus, you're grouping enemies together, which means that they get more, electric damage is even better because they're all grouped together. So, like, it's gonna have that quadratic scaling that you can get with electric procs. So, um, whether you want to build this for normal attack, kind of just like straight up damage, status damage, pure heavy attacks. I do really like Tennokai with her. I think Tennokai is like so fun with her. So this is the build that I've been using. I think she just does like stupid amounts of damage, so there's never any issues there. Naramon, I mean, it's a melee frame, right? So like Naramon's kind of a no-brainer. You want to make sure you're keeping your combo count up. Um, Literally like her primary and secondary like do not matter whatsoever. The only thing I put on my build here that has even more combo duration and the 2 auger mods just for like some additional layers of survivability. You could of course run a primer, like whatever, take your pick, Kuva Nucor, whatever primer of choice you like. Um, so for Archon shards, I have the 2 Tau Forged Violet Archon. I do just have 2 red ones because I actually have more Tau Forged Violet ones, but I think they're on Gyre for the electric damage. And then I have the maximum energy filled on spawn, which is a really nice quality of life. So, when you spawn in, you have like 400 energy. You can get into Hysteria, get your War Cry up, boom. You're going to have like 1100 energy and just be chilling, you know? You get a couple energized procs, like maybe you're in a group and your team has energized. You never really have energy issues with this build, which is really nice. So, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to talk about with Valkyr, but I think that's mostly it. So, try this build out. I think it's really solid. Um, I did crash a couple times because I was riplining enemies together, and when you ripline, you attack them, right? So if I like summon enemies here, so when you ripline, you attack enemies, and I had instances where I attacked a huge group of enemies on Steel Path and like got like a melee influence proc. And I don't know if it like my companions contagious bond or whatever procced as well, but I just there's just particle effects all over the entire screen. My game froze and Warframe crashed. So I did experience that a couple times. So yeah. I will say her 3 is the most surprising part of this whole thing for me. I was not expecting her 3 to feel as good as it does. Because let's say you're in a mission and you're like, oh, I'm zipping around. Let me see if they fixed this. It looks like maybe they fixed it. There is this really weird lag with her rip line, which I think that they fixed. It appears that they have fixed. So, they're gonna die from just that one attack. But, her 3 is really good. Like, I'm just having another way to pull enemies in is really nice. Also, they kept all of her, like, I love her screams and stuff. That's just, like, a really nice part of Valkyr for me. I think her animations look really nice now. So, this is like some Super Saiyan shit. That's really good. So, I think she's pretty awesome. So, now, all that being said, do I think the Valkyr rework is good? Yes. Do I think Valkyr is stronger now than she was before? Also, yes. I think she's I think she's one of those frames that can comfortably not use a helmet ability and feel really, really strong and really, really fun to play. Awesome. Does her new design have some glaring inconsistencies and elements that are very much at odds with each other? Yes. Do I wish that DE had taken the opportunity to take all the feedback they got regarding the rework, and rather than just make Valkyr invulnerable all the time, which is basically what she ended up becoming, take that feedback and actually rework enemy damage and rework enemy, how enemy damage scales, especially. I do wish that had happened, but it didn't. So maybe that's something they'll work on in the future. I hope they do. I mean, usually they're pretty okay with that kind of stuff. Sometimes it takes them a while. Like it took them a few years between when people started abusing the decaying dragon key and when they reworked shields, to their kind of final form. So maybe we'll get a similar rework for health and armor at some point. I'm not going to hold my breath. In the meantime, I do think that the rework came out where Valkyr feels very strong as long as you're abusing the hell out of her passive. So get your favorite melee, slap some range mods on her, abuse the heck out of her passive. As far as companions, I guess I can just cover that super quickly. I've been using a Panzervolpaphyla just for the viral spread. So, you know, grab your friendly neighborhood Panzer build. So yeah, this is what I've been using. Just even more layers of not dying. If you somehow manage to get through the shield gate and your rage gate, your pet's still got your back, you know? So, and of course, there's tons of viral spread, and then with duplex bond, you're making some clones, which this was pretty funny. So let me show you this one. So, here, I'm gonna slurp all these enemies up, and actually, I'm gonna do this a bunch of times to bring some points. So your companion benefits from this melee damage play. It looked like. So these Panzer Volpaphyla clones are like shredding. Well, not shredding, but they're they're doing a pretty darn good job killing these decently high level enemies. One final point, because I did mention how critical it is to be abusing her passive. So on her passive, the first weapon I tried was Vastalock, because I gotta get rid of my companion here. It's gonna kill everything. The first weapon I tried was the Vastalock, because I was like, okay, this thing's basically like a shotgun. You know, it shoots like a pellet spread. You can see that. So, if each of those pellets counted as an individual attack, maybe I could like instantly stack up my passive, right? So that was my first thought. Unfortunately, it does not. Her passive does not work on any ranged melee. So I tried Gunblades, I tried Glaives, I tried the Chlorophyll. None of them worked. If you killed an enemy with those, then it would work. You would get the passive from killing the enemy. But from hitting enemies, it has to be like an actual melee hit. So, you know, like the actual melee hits do stack it up. The ranged hits do not. Now, I did just get some stacks because I killed enemies with a status effect from the ranged attack. But you gotta hit them with the actual attack to stack it up. So, unfortunately, Gunblades and whatnot are not with her. So, you know, but I mean, there's still a million other melee options that are really, really strong. So, it's not a huge deal. So, very long story short, sorry for the long video, but I had many hours of testing I wanted to get out. I think that Valkyr herself is significantly better, can be completely immune all the time with this right build and playstyle. But I do hope that DE takes a look at enemy damage at some point in the future. So, go out, try Valkyr, go buy her heirloom skin, of course, when that comes out, and hope everybody has fun with the event, which I'll probably be dipping my toes in soon. So, thanks for watching. I'll see you around.